Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, The Top Tech for Development Trends in 2019. I'm Catherine Cheney, Senior Reporter at Devex, and I'll be your moderator today. I cover the West Coast of the U.S. in global development, including the role of technology and philanthropy. And as 2019 comes to a close, I reached out to a few experts to get their take on emerging tech trends that global development professionals should be paying close attention to, as well as what we might expect looking ahead to the new year. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. First, you can access any articles we'll be referencing today using the link in your resource list on screen. Feel free to submit your questions at any time using the Q&A box, and you can do that, from now until the end of our webinar today. Let's hope to get questions throughout and not just at the end. We want to make this as conversational and useful as possible for all of you. And after the presentations, we'll try to respond to as many of your questions as possible. If at any point you have difficulty viewing or hearing the presentation, just send us a message in that same Q&A box, and one of my colleagues on tech support will assist you. Also wanted to note that this webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a copy of this recording and the slide deck, plus some further resources via email. So joining me today is Nick Martin, the founder and CEO of Tech Change, which is an organization that provides online training on a wide range of tech for development topics. Nixon Gacheo, a governance and ICT for D consultant based in Kenya. Bobby Jefferson, Chief Technology Officer for DAI Global Health. And Benjamin Kump, Head of Innovation at DFID, the UK's Department for International Development. Before I hand it over to them, and really looking forward to their presentations, I just wanted to share a few quick reflections on the changing landscape of tech for development as I've seen it based on some coverage in 2019. So first, I wanted to note, while there is certainly a lot of hype around blockchain, and that might come up in some of our presentations, this did seem like a big year for cryptocurrency, which is powered by the same distributed ledger technology. So in June, Facebook, together with a range of partners, including global development organizations such as Mercy Corps, unveiled Libra, a new global currency built on blockchain, and you can find some Devex coverage on that. And this really builds on a trend. A growing number of nonprofits are accepting cryptocurrency donations. This year, UNICEF became the first United Nations agency to accept crypto as crypto without converting it. And it's now advising others at the UN on the value of cryptocurrency fundraising. We also had a story on RippleWorks, which is a nonprofit foundation based in the San Francisco Bay Area. Its endowment is based on cryptocurrency. And as the value of that crypto grew, so too did its ability to not only be an operator, but a funder with major resources at its disposal. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on this space as others with crypto wealth are likely to emerge as donors. And that'll be an interesting space to watch in 2020. So, we did have a number of Devex articles looking technology by technology. For example, messaging apps, artificial intelligence, blockchain, of course. But I hate to go technology by technology since we're going to hear about that from our speakers. I did just want to note a few broader trends that I've been seeing. One is this increased sense of urgency to close gender gaps. And that includes gender gaps in mobile phone usage, which you'll see here, and gender gaps in big data that can inform effective policymaking, and some interesting responses to that problem. One deep dive we did do at Devex was a look at drones. We had a series and a special report on drones for good. And again, to talk about the broader trend or takeaway and not just the technology itself, I think what was really interesting about this series of stories was looking at what does it really take to move from pilots to progress. So one of the examples we mentioned was the UAS coordinating body. It's an effort by 7 major donors and international organizations to coordinate their work on unmanned aerial systems and global health. And the members say they built this in response to this tendency of drone projects to start and stop without reaching real scale. And of course, that is a problem that is widespread in tech for development, not just in the drone space. So I think any learnings from drones can inform other tech for development projects. Finally, I'll just note this conversation continues of how to maximize the benefits and minimize the risks of tech for good. So I don't want to take too much time talking about these individual stories. We can send those as follow-up. But moving into 2020, with a decade left to achieve the SDGs, I'm really interested to follow this conversation on how can technology help or hinder progress on these goals. And I really hope that the global development community will continue to be engaged thought partners with the private sector, governments, and others on this big question. So we've navigated some of those benefits and risks in our conference calls and webinars. And I'm also hoping that from today, not only will this be useful for all of our participants, but it'll also be useful as I look to 2020 and figure out what to cover based on what our experts present to us today. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce our first speaker, which is Nick Martin. And Nick, as I mentioned, started an organization that's behind a huge range of high-quality courses on tech for development, so I know he has lots of insights to share. So Nick, can you go ahead and take over here and tell us, what have you seen in 2019 and also what might we expect in 2020?
I can, and you can hear me okay, Kat?
Yeah, you sound great.
Fantastic. Well, pleasure to be here, and just a huge fan of all the incredible articles you've been writing for Devex on this intersection of technology and global development, and excited to share with you all a couple high-level trends I'm seeing in my world. So as Kat mentioned, I run a company called Tech Change. Many of you may know us. We build beautiful and engaging online courses on all kinds of global development topics, and I also teach at Columbia, GW, and Georgetown. So I'm going to try and do this in under 10 minutes, but my trends will be super high level. Because I am most focused on the education world, I will go a little bit deeper on some training trends I'm seeing based on some of the work we've done this year, and they may not all feel connected and narrative driven, but I'll do the best I can to connect some dots and stage the scene for some of our great presenters following me. So the first thing I wanted to say is we've been doing quite a bit of work at Tech Change with the Digital Impact Alliance, DIAL, many of you may know. And we did both a series of trainings for donor agencies and a number of ideation workshops around the world in places like Medellin, Nairobi, Seattle, and so forth. And what we found is that there is a growing sense of adoption, a growing hunger for organizations to develop and embrace the digital principles. And beyond just endorsing them, I think there's a desire to figure out how they mainstream these principles in their organizations. And that's really exciting because I think we've reached a nice tipping point. I asked my colleague Alana at DIAL today, how many endorsers do we have of the digital principles as of this morning? And she said 204. So that's really exciting. As I mentioned, we've been doing these workshops around the world and have had a great chance to connect with folks of all backgrounds, not just international development implementers and donors, but also technology firms, non-traditional actors in the development space. And we asked them essentially, what type of training, resources, and so forth would be valuable for you all as you manage digital transformation, really kind of the broader challenges around digital transformation. And so truly from a training and learning perspective, I think we heard a lot of people saying we want online credentialing in technology for development, even though there's sort of varied value by target learner. We're finding that there just are not a lot of case studies out there for how to do digital transformation and emerging tech projects well, which is, I think, a good invitation for those listening on the call to help source these. And when I say good case studies, I think I'm really thinking about narratives that balance what worked well with what didn't. I think we do have more folks saying, we tried this and it was great and it was awesome, but trying to find stuff that we could actually teach with, I think, is critical. We're finding that people are busy no matter where they are with respect to having time to do trainings in digital transformation. And and that folks, it's not that people are sitting around in the global south unemployed and waiting for digital transformation training. No, in fact, everyone is working and working hard. It's just a matter of trying to figure out how to balance their busy schedules with training resources. And I think we're also seeing the demand for blended and hybrid training and things like coaching and mentorship at the expense of online self-paced courses and massive open online courses. And so I think maybe a return to the more peer-to-peer learning models and cohort-based learning than the kind of highly scaled everything goes self-paced courses. I think part of this trend is also that we're seeing that donors are getting more digitally savvy. It's really exciting. We were at GIZ, DFID, CETA over in Sweden, USAID, did a number of trainings around the digital principles, and I can tell you that donors are not just embracing the principles, but also hiring more folks with digital backgrounds to think more intentionally about not just IT, but the digital aspects of development. So that's really exciting. And we are helping Dial to build more resources around how to bridge the digital principles with processes like RFPs or the evaluation of proposals. So I think that's quite exciting and a trend that we're watching closely. We also saw the USAID digital strategy come out this year, and a number of you who are listening may have been involved in one of their many public sessions for getting feedback and insight. And so we're excited to see this process take off, and I think this represents a really exciting move at the donor level to embracing tech. So moving to where we're seeing some of the emerging tech trends. So Kat mentioned blockchain had a great year. I would agree with you, Kat. I also think, though, that ML had an even better year. Artificial intelligence, machine learning was the hot topic in all of our tech salons. It was the thing that we were hearing more and more organizations building capacity around. I think this is a good thing. I'm a Bitcoin enthusiast. I love cryptocurrency. I love blockchain, but I do think that machine learning certainly seems to be where the hype and the energy is in our circles. And that's not always a good thing. I share this slide here. I think we're hearing more and more people saying, you know what would solve this problem? Machine learning. And so I think with any hype trend, we do have to be careful and reflective about what it can actually do. I think we are seeing some really exciting applications of machine learning in capacities like geospatial analysis, what I call customer support for SMS campaigns, and then photo analysis of crop diseases. So we're seeing it pop up in a number of different capacities, which, don't get me wrong, is exciting. Just always good to check the hype where we can. Right. In terms of sectors, we spend a lot of time thinking about which sectors are at inflection points. And I would say coming off of the Global Digital Health Forum last week and being part of a digital health working group at Wilton Park this year, that digital health really is at an inflection point. We've been teaching courses on this topic since 2013. And I can say that right now, at the end of 2019, there seems to be a really nice sweet spot of alignment between what the donor priorities are, where the implementers see their value, and complementarity around that value. And then also this whole swath of global goods, these open source tools that have been developed to support digital health interventions around the world. It's just a really exciting moment. And for our part, we are working to build a digital health 101 curriculum with World Health Organization, ITU, UNICEF, USAID, PATH, that will target government officials who are, in a sense, ready to really think intentionally about taking their fractured health systems and thinking strategically about health systems architecture and interoperability at new levels. So we're excited about that. And as part of that effort, we have designed what we think is a really cool board game. And so in a sense, sort of a return to the analog, because many of us may be fatigued by our screens. So we built this cool board game that essentially helps to stage this concept of interoperability. The goal is to take your fractured health systems that are at the community level and scale them to the national level before you reach 5 health systems failures. And every year there's a new health outbreak, malaria or TB, something happens. And every year an investor gives you some new system. And sometimes the system is useful that the investor gives you, and sometimes it is not. So true to life in many forms. And we're excited to sort of design more experiences like this for the digital health audience and others who might be listening. The last trend I'll share, number 5, is that big tech is here. Last week, we had a fascinating conversation with the Facebook Data for Good team and talked about disaster mapping. We talked about the Sustainable Development Goals. And I will say that for better or worse, and I know Facebook and other big tech firms can sometimes be persona non grata in development circles, I think they're showing up in a big way, and we have to, as a community, think about what this means. I will say that just having listened to Facebook last week, the data they have around population density, connectivity, aggregate data around gender, where women and girls are for various types of programming, is phenomenal. It's really incredible, and I do think that it could provide tremendous value to development actors. Some are already using it. And so I do think this is a question we're going to have to grapple with more in the years to come. And I, for one, am excited about it, but I know that it represents a number of challenges as we move forward. And then I will also say that we're doing a lot of work with Microsoft at Tech Change to help them build their Digital Skills Center in partnership with TechSoup. And here I think we're seeing, for small and medium-sized nonprofits, managing digital transformation is a totally tremendous and onerous task. And so how do we effectively help these small and medium-sized nonprofits around the world do that? Many of them already have some form of Microsoft products, for better or worse, and we have to figure out how to get them to derive the most value from those. And so to me, a big part of next year and the years to come will be bridging that gap and providing training and skills to those organizations that need it most. And then I'll just end. What were the Tech Change most popular courses this year? We saw our How to Teach Online course, which is essentially a packaging and a sort of meta course on all the things we've learned in the last 10 years of teaching online. We open source that and share it with you all. And that was our most popular course. We're running it again this January for any who might be interested. We saw artificial intelligence, as I mentioned, in terms of enrollments and interest, outpace blockchain for the first year. So that was also noteworthy. And then I tell you, data visualization and data science, but particularly data visualization, just remains popular year after year. I think there will never be a shortage of people and organizations who need to think intentionally about how to tell better stories with data. And so we saw, again, a very popular running of that course this past November. So, Kat, I will end here with this in the spirit of data visualization, this great slide, what to do. Make sure you remember how to print your graphics if you're designing them for the web, and then you print them. Here's Obama's divided nation. I think I'll end there and pass the buck.
That's perfect. From epicfail.com.
From epicfail.com. Yeah.
That was great. And there's so many points I'd love to pick up on. We'll have to wait for the Q&A for that. But I really loved your point about there not being a lot of case studies on how to do digital transformation and emerging tech projects well, and this need to share not just what worked well, but what didn't. So that's something I try to do in my coverage, but it is hard to get people to talk about what didn't work well, even though there are lots of learnings there. So I totally agree with you and hope we can come back to that in the Q&A. Also, your point, so thank you for helping to drive that conversation. And your point on digital health at an inflection point was fascinating. I know Bobby will speak to that in a little while in his presentation. But first, I want to go ahead and bring Nixon into this conversation. So Nixon, in preparation for this webinar, you and I were speaking and you mentioned the fourth industrial revolution, which is a term often used to capture this digital era that we're in. So I'd love to hear more from you about the opportunities and maybe some of the challenges you see when it comes to leveraging the 4IR, the 4IR for development outcomes in Kenya.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think I'll just dive on and say that we stand at the brink of technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to each other in its scale, scope, and complexity. And if you look at what Nick and the rest of us will be talking about, it just shows you how we are moving from the first industrial revolution, which used water and steam power, to mechanized production, to the second, which used electrical power to create, mass production, and the third revolution, which essentially used electronics and information technology to automate production. Now, the fourth industrial revolution is building really on the third industrial revolution that has been occurring since the middle of the last century. It is characterized by a fusion of, technology that blurs the lines between physical, digital, and even biological spheres. Next slide. So, this fourth industrial revolution actually brings to us a lot of opportunities that comes up with all these technologies that we are discussing. The fourth IR has the potential to raise global income level and improve the quality of life for populations around the world. To date, those who have gained the most of it have been consumers, really, who have been able to afford and access digital, world. And technology has also made it possible for new products and new services that increase the efficiency and also the pleasure of our personal lives, like ordering a cab, via Uber, via Taxify, and all these other applications that have come up. Booking a flight and the comfort of your seat, buying a product online, making a payment, listening to music. All these things have been really revolutionized, and in future, technological innovation will also lead to the supply side miracle, the long-term gain in efficiency and productivity. Of course, the other thing that this technology has also brought about as a challenge is they're creating greater inequity. Equality, because greater inequality. Sorry, because those who have seem to enjoy a lot of technology, and those who don't have seem to be left behind, or so to speak, left out of this enjoyment of this technology. And therefore, I think coming up is that we need to see how to bring everybody on board. And various governments and various states have been working on how do you, connect the unconnected. And I think this also speaks to SDG 9 of the UN that speaks about connecting the unconnected, so that the populace who are left behind and we can sort of bridge the digital gap, so that everybody enjoys this technology moving forward. I'm convinced of one thing, that in future, talent more than capital will represent the critical factor of production. This, of course, will give rise to job market increasingly being segregated into low skill and low payment, and high skill and high payment segments, which in turn will lead to increase in social tension. Meaning that if those who do not have the skill, those who do not have the skill to either operate or learn the skills of using this technology will feel left behind. And therefore, it will distort, so to speak, the job market and create a lot of social tension around the technologies and people. Inequality also presents the greater societal concerns associated with the fourth industrial revolution. The largest beneficiary of innovation tend to be the providers of the intellectual and the physical capital, the innovators, talk about the shareholders and investors, which explains the rising gap in wealth between those dependent on capital versus those dependent on labor. And therefore, technology is therefore one of the main reasons why income in so many sectors have stagnated and even decreased. For a majority of the population, for instance, in high-income countries, the demand for high, skilled workers has increased, while the demand for workers with less education and lower skills have also decreased. So even as we discuss about the trends of 2019 and what technology can do, there are challenges and opportunities that they bring about. And one of the opportunities that I've discussed, and maybe to just highlight on the impact of what technology is doing in business, is across all industries, we see a very clear evidence that technology, which is underpinning the fourth industrial revolution, has a major impact on businesses. On the supply side, many industries are seeing the introduction of new technologies that create entirely, of course, new ways of serving existing needs and significantly disrupting the existing industry value chain. I've just mentioned the likes of Uber, the likes of Taxify, disrupting the traditional taxis, which me and you know, where you have to leave your house traditionally to go out and, maybe flag down a taxi to be able to take you somewhere. Unlike that, we're seeing where in the comfort of my house, I can actually order a taxi to come to my address, and I'm able to, use the taxi for my transportation. So on a major shift on the demand side, we are also seeing the growing trend of transparency in terms of consumer engagement and new patterns of consumer behavior. For instance, in the field of ICT and agriculture, which I'm highly involved, we are seeing technologies such as blockchain, which are able to actually help in the supply chain of food. And you're able to tell where food originates from that you get in your plate in the house, or the food that you eat in the cafeteria. It's now easy to use traceability technology through blockchain to actually know where the food that you're eating comes from. The other issue, next slide, is the enabling platform that combine both demand and supply to disrupt existing industrial structures, such as those we see within the sharing of on-demand economy. This kind of technology platform renders easy to use by the smartphone and convince people and even be able to convince people assets and data, and that's creating an entirely new way of consuming goods and services in the process. Now, on the whole, especially on the customer expectation, we're seeing increasingly customer being the epicenter of some of these technological advancements. And all the organizations are doing or industry is doing is to improve how customers are served, and in terms of physical products and services, you can see enhanced digital capabilities that increase the value of the products and services that we enjoy nowadays. In terms of new technologies have made it very easy to make assets more durable and resilient, while data and analytics are transforming how these assets are being maintained. And so let me move to one area that this technology has really impacted or continue to impact, and that is the area of government. There are new technologies and platforms that increasingly are enabling citizens to engage with government, voice their opinion, coordinate their efforts, and even circumvent the supervision of public institutions. And government is also gaining new technology and powers to increasingly control the population based on surveillance systems and ability to control digital infrastructure, especially in the world that are threatened by terrorism. We're seeing a lot of increase in surveillance systems and using drones and the likes of technology for government to be able to ensure security for their citizens and so forth. On the whole, however, government will increasingly face pressure to change their current approach to public engagement and policy making, as their central role of conducting policy diminishes owing to new source of competition and the distribution and dissemination of power and new technology and making it very, very possible. But the challenge I see for government is that if government and public authority in that case are not able to adapt to this kind of revolution, they will not survive. And this is clearly because with this kind of technology having come, government adoption of this technology is warranted so that they are able to be on top of citizen engagement and the new policy formation around the new technologies. The other thing that I want to talk about is the impact on people, and essentially because 4AR will change not only what we do, but also who we are. It affects our identity and all the issues associated with it, and especially our sense of privacy, and also the notion of ownership and consumption patterns. The integration of technology in our life, for me, could actually diminish some of the human capabilities, such as compassion and cooperation. And you see greatly that the human capability of compassion and cooperation is diminishing because people have smartphones. They're using their smartphones even in where you're supposed to have a conversation with each other. You find many people, having communication with people who are not with but are outside of it. So one of the greatest individual challenges posed by new information technology is privacy. We instantly understand why it is so essential. Yet the tracking and sharing of information about us is crucial. It's crucial and part of the new connectivity. I remember, I think some time back, when I think the House of Congress had called Mark Zuckerberg to ask about how is enabling privacy on Facebook, and I think that is a conversation that and a challenge that comes with this new technology. How to ensure one's privacy, even as we use the social medias and all that. So, how
hey, Nixon, this is
moving?
Nixon, sorry to jump in.
Yes.
This is Catherine here. I do think the privacy point is a good one, and I want to make sure we have time to get to our other presenters and revisit some of this during the Q&A. So I just wanted to know if you have any final thoughts, if we could wrap it up.
Okay. So shaping the future, how do we shape the future in terms? I think for Africa and majorly for the developing world, the challenge we face on this 4 IRs are issues related to the kind of skills and education that we need to impact to the citizen. And I've just highlighted some of the issues that I think need to be taken into consideration with the various governments in Africa and developing world. One is expand access to early childhood education so that the curricula that we are building into the children will be curricula that will emphasize on creativity and drive, future readiness in terms of curricula. The other one is investing in developing and maintaining a professionalized teaching workforce. This would also include continuous learning for the teachers and the lecturers and so forth, so that they are able to learn more than what they are being exposed to. And then early exposure of workplace and career guidance, that will speak to how we quickly engage students, the trainees with industry, so that they are able to learn quickly from the industry, even as they go to study. And really, finally, is also to invest in digital fluency and ICT literacy skills in our young populace, so that they are able to adapt these skills and be able to be the drivers rather than being consumers of this technology moving forward. And lastly, what I want to say is that that these technologies that define the fourth industrial revolution, in the end, it comes down to people and values. We need to shape a future that works for all of us by putting people first and empowering them, and be able to realize that in all this, the people first and the values are very important. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Nixon. So I want to go ahead and hand it over to Bobby. And I know that, Bobby, in addition to your work with DAI Global Health, you're also an advisor to several health technology startups. And it was great to hear that Nick mentioned digital health is at a tipping point. That's sort of been my hunch and why I was hoping to get an expert on tech and global health to join us for this webinar today. So really grateful to have your perspective. Would love to hear your thoughts on what we should take note of from 2019 and what we should look ahead to for next year.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. I'm Bobby Jefferson, Chief Technology Officer, DI Global Health. As you mentioned, I sit on a number, at least 3 health technology advisory boards, and I also participate in innovation prizes like grants, when you grant out for social pitches. So in order to just be brief as possible, I've tried to summarize on my top slide here on the digital health area what I have seen, and I also checked into the team, the Center for Digital Acceleration team, and by Krista Baptista, I checked in. What are the top technologies in digital health we've seen? So Uberization, so the Uber of healthcare is a definite trend, and I'll talk a little bit more of exactly what that means. Infant biometrics, so identifying not just adults, but the more harder problem, how to identify newborns. Can you identify newborns? Software and AI as a medical device, transforming your mobile phone into a clinical medical device, approved by U.S. FDA. Cybersecurity for healthcare. So we know that there's a lot of this cybersecurity issues, but now on the healthcare side, we're being targeted. And why? Why are both nation states and individuals trying to target our little hospitals and clinics? And there are really good reasons why they're incentivized, unfortunately, to do that. The other trend is around the imagery analysis and machine learning for disease detection. So being able to detect precancerous cells and glaucoma and a few other things. And then finally, as Nick mentioned as well, the digital development principles has a real key aspect around interoperability, capturing data once and sharing multiple times is really important. So in the Uberization of health, what that really means is as Uber brings information, taxis, services to you, we're seeing patient having instant access at their fingertips now to information and data about their health, that personalized health. And that's becoming, a lot of startups, a lot of technology firms using Bluetooth, different devices to be able to do that. So we're seeing both in, for example, like in Cambodia, where, remote villages that are cut off or don't have access, that you can have a community health worker or a social entrepreneur who can do blood testing and blood pressure monitoring and glucose monitors, all within, the remote and local community or the urban community. We're seeing this Uberization of digital health, like in Haiti, where it's difficult to go from department to department. If you're a pregnant mother, having access to information and data where the community health worker can, do an assessment of you locally because you can't get to the hospital, is really, really important. So we're seeing this I'm seeing this as a trend for 2019 and 2020 as more companies get involved and increase their use of digital personalized data. For infant biometrics, we're doing a lot of work around identity management, how to identify patients uniquely. And so seeing now Dr. Eli out of University of California, San Diego, has done some breakthrough work on answering the question, can you identify newborns? And this is very difficult because if you think of newborns and trying to do biometrics, their finger sizes, their thumb sizes, are 5 times smaller than adults. So trying to identify them is quite a challenge, especially as they begin to grow from newborns all the way an increase in age. And so to be able to track that and fingerprint them and link them to families, you can't use traditional ways of doing that. So we've definitely seen a trend now, especially with Dr. Elia's work, is in infant biometrics. He's got really good breakthroughs there, and that's being used at a pilot stage, but it's expanding out further. Cybersecurity for healthcare. So as I mentioned before, in the news, Singapore had a cyber hacker insider who compromised HIV data for 4,000 patients, and he did it to try to expose those people for blackmail. And we know that your information about your health is more important, in fact, than your financial data, because your information about your health tells you about your behavior. And so on the dark web, they really want to know what your behavior is, what's your lifestyle. That helps in guessing and knowing what your password is today and in the future. So while on the financial side, you can recover and get your money back or find a way to recover. On your health side, once your HIV status, once your health status is known, there's no easy way, you can't undo that. So that is very highly desirable. We're putting on workshops of how to help protect health practitioners. The National Academy of Sciences just issued a report that says, how hackers have changed the retinal scan of AI and ML tools. So AI ML to detect, anomalies in your eye and retina. You can add false value that tells the system, yes, you do need surgery, when you don't. So now the potential hackers have ability to affect your health and your life. as Vic mentioned, thank you as well, the digital principles, it's very important that as these new technologies, today and tomorrow, they need to have the ability for interoperability. So you can't lock in your data. So your new health app today should be accessible, whether that's using FHIR or some other interoperability standard. Being able to capture one's, whether that's HIV, TB, malaria data sets is really important. But even more important is being able to share that both now and in the future. Augmented reality. So there's a number of startups that attended a MIT and Boston-based startup. And augmented reality in the pharma world is really huge at the moment. The use cases, you've got medicine, it's generic meds, the pharmacist is giving it to you. You now put your smartphone over the med, and it gives you a little brief on what the side effects and how do I use it and how many times a day I should take it. So again, this personalization of medicine that you have with using augmented reality, and as I chatted with Nick earlier, the micro learning and YouTube generation is here. So being able to take advantage of that. And then lastly for me is around, the visual detection of diseases, and a lot of the AI tools and ML tools are unregulated. So yes, you're in Zambia or Nigeria and someone says they've got an AI tool that can help do assessment, but there's been no testing against it. So in the US, we now have software as a medical device, or your AI as a medical device. So that way there's some standards or some rigor that says, yes, your tool that's been developed is actually, meets some minimum criteria. And I think both for 2019 and 2020, I see this as an important factor as more companies embed AI and ML diagnostics. Today it's a black box. And if the clinician and physicians don't understand why the diagnosis happened, just because it happened is an important element in understanding low and middle income countries' ability to adapt and use AI and ML tools. So I'd like to give a shout out to those who are, want to follow up at the end of the year on our DI Digital blog. We also post the top 10, 20 innovations that we've seen, and happy to, get comments from people about that. So Kathy, I was trying to get us back on time and provide a brief summary. Thank you.
Yes, well done on timing. Thanks so much, Bobby. Appreciate it. So we've heard about tech for development trends from Nick. We've gotten insights on the fourth industrial revolution in Kenya from Nixon. And we just had a deep dive on what this looks like in the global health space with Bobby. Now I'm really excited to hand it over to Ben. Ben, I'd love for you to help us zoom out a bit and understand not just what tech to pay attention to in 2019, but really how you've approached tech for development. And I know you might want to get to issues like business models and ethics and things we haven't really been able to address so far. So happy to hand it over to you.
Thanks a lot. Before I do that, I quickly want to frame what we do in the UK Department for International Development. At the moment, in terms of very practical work, we have, and I invite everyone listening to check it out, a digital strategy, doing development in a digital world. And I think what makes the document worth looking at is the strong focus on leaving no one behind and digital inclusion. We have a harnessing tech for development strategy, and there we put a huge focus on tech developed in country. And for some inspiration and really solid evidence on that topic, I recommend checking out a great talk by DFID's chief economist, Rachel Glenister, and the link is shared in the chat box. And just to highlight a few of our programs, in case there are colleagues on the line who work in the field and are interested in partnering with DFID, we invest in assistive technology for and with people with disabilities. And to me, this is a really important example because it's true to one of the digital principles and an innovation principle, which is design with the user, really following the paradigm of nothing for us without us. We work a lot on agri-tech, including with GSMA, and we work just now launched massively on technology for education. So lots to talk about with Nick. I just want to quickly highlight one internally focused program where we're always looking for tech partners, where we have a database, and anyone interested in signing up to our database of tech partners for our Frontier Technology live stream, please reach out to me. If you go to the next slide, I can do that. This is just an overview of our portfolio where we essentially manage small funds and invite different colleagues to come forward with a hypothesis which emerging technology might add value to your work and might help address a development challenge in your context. And we provide methodological support with partners on agile development and invest in a portfolio essentially for us to better understand those technologies to eventually adopt them in a meaningful way in DFID. And at the bottom of the slide, you see the different technologies. So that's a super short overview of the technology work in DFID in a very brief nutshell, and the invitation to listeners who work on technology to potentially see if there are partnership opportunities. Now, zooming out of this, I thought I want to present a few of the some weak and some not so weak signals I saw in 2019 that also inform our work in DFID moving forward. And the first one's actually on nanotech and gene editing. I assume many of you have followed the news in October 2018 when the twin girls in China were born, the first genetically modified babies that were born with CRISPR technology. And then it became a bit quiet, at least on the news front, in terms of gene editing. But the field of genomics is so fastly advancing, and Bobby pointed it out too. In the middle of 2019, there was a small but potentially massive breakthrough in nanotechnology for gene editing. So far, genetic modification for plants in the nutrition field has been done by trying to insert the genes in the plant tissue through bacteria mainly, with a pretty high failure rate. But in 2019, a small carbon nanotube was not only developed but tested and has a massive success rate. And I'm far from being an expert in the field, but it looks like that could be a step change in the field of genetically modified food production. And I personally have very ambivalent feelings about GMOs, but it's nonetheless a huge trend in the context of malnutrition, of nutrition, of new forms of food production. We are looking massively at opportunities of urban food production. Just in Africa alone, for example, the prediction is that by 2050, about 1.5 billion people will live in cities, in mega cities in the African continent alone. And about 80% of all food consumed on this earth will be consumed in cities. So the implications in that field are very high and something to follow up on. Likewise, in the medical field, a lot of the gene editing work and the nanotech work is happening in the medical field, where we observe like an emerging trend in the global north, which is increasing investments in augmenting the healthy and the wealthy and de-emphasizing investments in applied research to do what medicine was set out to do, which is curing sickness and supporting all humans, regardless of wealth status, in being healthy. So another trend on the inequality side to further watch, especially in the context of gene editing, but also of nanotech. Now, moving on to not such a weak signal and news in 2019 that more unearthed what happened in the recent past and not so much what happened only in 2019. But what we realized happened since 2009, 2010, in terms of invasion not only of privacy, but the invasion of social processes and the co-opting of social movements in 2019 was, to me, more than eye-opening. You see on the slide a quote from the author of Surveillance Capitalism, a book that I recommend. And the picture is taken from Trinidad and Tobago, where the parent company of Cambridge Analytica in 2010 was engaged in influencing the election, working with the ruling party and essentially identifying opportunities to encourage young people of African descent to not vote. So an explicit goal was to increase apathy through micro-targeting. And the mechanism of micro-targeting were in 2019 more and more made visible by researchers, by documentaries. And I think all development practitioners need to stay on top of the recent trends there, particularly when it refers to the big tech companies their data privacy models and their political will to engage further in the field or not. Going back to Nick's comment that right now Facebook might be a partner non grata, and I do think there's no alternative to collaborating with the tech giants, but not only to advance incremental improvements, but also to put some real fundamental question around business models and ethics on data privacy on the table. And I elaborate on the business models in a second. In the context of micro-targeting and influencing individual behavior from what we buy to who we vote for, a small and weak signal in 2019, but nonetheless an intriguing one, and I'm curious how it will pan out. What you see on the slide depicts an AI technology that's called style transfer. And I'm quite intrigued with creative AI and the advancements. It was in 2018 when the first novel that was written by artificial intelligence was published. But this year we see more and more advancements on style transfer, essentially teaching an AI to adapt the painting style of a famous artist, and you see the result on the slide. Now, the next frontier what's currently being done is for AI to mine written data. So essentially mine, let's say, my style of posting on Twitter and posting elsewhere is accessible, mining my written content in my email, and then essentially creating content to influence me to either buy something, vote something, or do something else, and that avoids writing styles that I might not associate with. So style transfer, a small weak signal or something to watch that might become more and more relevant in the context of influencing human behavior. And the last one on the frontier of new digital skills that are required is deepfakes. Deepfakes, an AI-powered technology that essentially superimposes the picture of an individual on another individual to mimic a human action, was kind of coined to be a major disruptive force in 2019 and didn't quite pan out as disruptive. At least we haven't learned about it. In the beginning of the year, there was an incident in Gabon. The president was out of the country in two different countries on medical treatment, and the public asked themselves if he's still alive, if he is still well, and the video of him was published and overlaid with audio. And it satisfied some people in Gabon, but others actually thought this is a deep fake, this is not real, and a week later, there was a military coup attempt. The president is alive and has made public appearances since. The verdict still out. This was a deep fake, but this is like one of the first more prominent examples where deep fakes might have been used to influence political processes. And I'm mentioning deep fakes also at the end of 2019 moving forward because at DIFFEN we're really committed to digital inclusion. And we are very well aware that that includes a lot of offline elements. And so it's a new frontier for digital skills. I wrap up with two good signals in 2019. One is technology is not a force we don't have any control over. There are policy options. And I want to point to San Francisco, to Oakland, potentially Portland, banning facial recognition software because they're just looking at the available evidence with the lack of comparative advantage in, for example, police practices and the insufficient guardrails for citizen privacy. And in parallel, we've seen massive rollout of facial recognition in India. We've seen similar signals in Zimbabwe. So to just point out, there are policy options, and I really recommend following Kate Crossword and her team on the AI Institute in New York. And to wrap up, and this is kind of building on Nixon, I don't think we should see technology and social media as developing to necessarily dystopian futures. I think there are very explicit design options even the tech giants could take if they rethink their business models. If we push them successfully in essentially reframing the time on device massive success indicator to others. And we can see that there are design options that work. The example is V-Taiwan. That doesn't admittedly have a commercial element to its business model, but it's very much designed to highlight themes around which consensus emerges and looks at what creates polarization on the main social media platforms. How can we design it differently? And it was used as a collective intelligence tool to, for example, have citizen not only discuss, but eventually come up with the regulation for Uber in Taiwan. So I'll stop here. Really recommend checking out more on Taiwan as one of the many emerging platforms that in the here and now pose alternatives to the major tech players and their business models that are very much focused on feeding us polarizing content, mining our private data, really keeping up the dichotomy of data producer and data user. And with that, back to you. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Ben. And I love that you found ways to build on the points that each of our speakers made. So we've come to the end of our scheduled time for this webinar, and I know it says Q&A here. This webinar ended up being heavier on presentations and lighter on Q&A, but we do have a few questions that have come in, and what we would like to do is try and address those questions in our write-up. So I'll be following up with each of our speakers individually. So if you do have questions, please keep them coming in the Q&A box, or you can email webinars@devex.com, and we'll try and address those for the write-up. But I do think it was valuable to fill our time hearing from our speakers about some of their insights on tech for development trends in 2019 and what to look for in 2020. So we'll be sending a link to this recording of the webinar, as well as a slide deck and an email going out soon. And we hope you'll join us again for one of our digital events in the new year. If you can give us some feedback by filling out the brief survey that will pop up once we're done here, we'd really appreciate it. And finally, a big thank you again to our panelists for your insights and to all of you for joining us today.